everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Savannah. Today we're talking about building in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Now if you've played the Planet Coaster or Planet Zoo games, you'll be very familiar with these mechanics and how they work, but if not, this is the first time we've seen these mechanics brought to a Jurassic World Evolution game. There are a couple differences, so we'll go over everything, where your pieces are, how to move them, couple tips and tricks. Sit back, grab a snack. It may be a long one because we have a lot to talk about. And if you find this video helpful, please do leave a like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. To start, let's talk about our pieces menu, how things are organized, and how to search for items. The scenery tab is located on the left-hand side of the screen, just below the little lightning bolt, and this is where you'll find all the different modular pieces you can build with. When you first open the menu, you'll see that there are a bunch of different categories to click on to find the pieces that you're looking for, or you can search a piece by name in the search bar at the very top. If you try and search for a piece without first clicking into a category, the menu will not show you options as you type. For example, if I type in stone, I'm not going to see any pieces until I actually hit enter. However, after you've entered into a category and then you try to search something, it will start narrowing down the pieces with every letter that you type. Learning the names of the pieces is going to be important, and you can see that as you hover over the top of a piece, the name of it appears just to the right of this menu. This will help you learn what things are called and search for them easier in the future. You'll also notice that some of the pieces have these little grid lines behind them. This is going to tell you whether a piece is what I'll refer to as a gridded piece or a non-gridded piece. We're going to talk about gridded pieces a little bit later on in the video, so for now, we're going to focus on these non-gridded ones. If I select a non-gridded piece like this stone trim, it'll bring the piece out into the world attached to your mouse. So moving your mouse around will move the piece around. When you first start the game, a controls panel will also appear in the top right-hand corner of your screen, which will show you all the different hotkeys for building. If you're new to the game, this is super helpful, but you can also turn it off by going to Settings, Gameplay, and then toggling for the controls prompt box, setting it to off. Since this is a tutorial video, I'm going to go ahead and leave it on. Back to our stone trim piece. Once you have the piece out, clicking your left mouse button will place the piece down wherever you move it to and automatically give you another piece to work with, and hitting Ctrl Z will undo what you just did. To rotate the piece 90 degrees left or right, you'll hit the Z or X keys respectively. You can change this angle with angle snap, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the video, but for our purposes here, Z and X will rotate your object by whatever angle you have it set to. If you're looking for a little more precision with your rotation, you can hold down the C key and rotate the piece by moving your mouse back and forth. Again, this will rotate smoothly if you don't have angle snap on, and it'll kind of click to different angles if you do have angle snap on. The same thing can be done with a piece's height by holding down the shift key and moving your mouse up and down. And again, clicking the left mouse button will place the piece down wherever you have it set. Some of the pieces will also have an option to change their color, like our stone trim piece, and these pieces are referred to as being flexi-colored or having a flexi-color option. If a piece can be recolored, colored square swatches, say that 5 times fast, will appear just to the right of the piece menu. Clicking on a square brings up the color menu, and from there you can either pick a color from the paint bucket tab, or you can go over to the paint palette tab for a wider range of color options. You can also type in a hex code if you want to match a color from another piece, or make sure all your colors on one piece are the same. So, for example, say we want the top of our stone trim piece to match this very bright pink stone wall. First, we need to exit out of our piece menu and select the stone wall piece, bringing up a new small menu in the top left-hand corner. From here, click on the pink color swatch and find the hex code right above the Accept button. Hovering over the hex code with your mouse brings up a text cursor, which will then allow you to highlight the code and copy it using Control-C. Nothing will happen when you hit Control-C, but I promise the game has copied it. Alternatively, you can also write the code down on a notepad and manually type it in again if you want to do it that way instead. But now that we have the hex code copied, it's safe to exit out of the piece menu and go back and find our stone trim piece that we want to work with. Click on the color swatch you want to change, highlight the hex code, paste the hex code we copied by hitting Control-V, and then enter or select the Accept button, and voila! A super bright pink trim to match the wall. Now you might notice that the same colors on different items might look a little bit different, and this is normal. Between textures and different pieces, sometimes the colors aren't exact, but for most of the time, it's a pretty good starting point. Once you've recolored something, you'll see a small color swatch with that color will appear just above the hex code, showing you the recent colors you've worked with. So if you're wanting to stick to a few different colors on a build, this is a really easy way of recoloring your pieces without having to constantly copy or paste or search for colors. They just appear right there for you. Lastly, if you color something and change your mind, you can always reset a piece to its default colors by hitting the reset button between accept and cancel. Now, before we move on to the advanced move tool, let's talk about the settings in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen below the pieces menu. Let's skip position snap and talk about align to surface first. Align to surface does exactly what it says it does. It aligns your piece to the surface of whatever terrain or other piece your mouse is hovering over. So if we move our stone trim piece over to this conveniently placed little hill, you can see that the bottom of our piece stays in line with the ground when the terrain changes. The same thing happens when you hover over other pieces. The most common use for this is going to be if you're building something that isn't perfectly lined up with the world grid, or you're trying to match an angle on a roof. You can turn on align to surface and get that right orientation, and then open the advanced move tool and go from there. Going back to position snap, this will self-align non-gridded pieces to each other. For example, taking our same stone piece without position snap on, you'll see that I need to manually move the piece around to get it to line up correctly with the piece I've already placed. This can also be done with more precision using the advanced move tool, but if you're wanting to place the same item multiple times in a row, it's much faster to use the position snap feature. Let's look at some fences over here, since that's a good example of when you might use this feature. Selecting this straight chain link fence and turning position snap on, it makes it really easy to place a whole row that are perfectly lined up. This feature also works with different pieces. So if I place down a straight chain link fence, I can then attach a curved chain link fence piece the same way. Or if for some reason I want to switch to this tiny little fence, I can also continue on with it perfectly in line. The last option on this menu is one I've already mentioned, angle snap. This is the one I use most often. Going back a little to when we were talking about rotating pieces, with angle snap off, C will allow you to rotate a piece around smoothly to whatever angle you want. But turning on angle snap will snap your piece to certain angles as you rotate it. It will also change the amount your piece rotates, as I mentioned with Z and X keys. Now on to the core of this tutorial, the advanced move tool. If you've never played a Planet game like Planet Zoo or Planet Coaster, the advanced move tool is probably going to take you some time to get the hang of. Although it can be confusing and it's sometimes very frustrating, it is the tool used the most to create incredibly detailed builds. Sticking with our stone piece here, instead of pressing a key and using my mouse to manipulate its position, I'm going to press R to bring up the advanced move tool. Once you've pressed R to bring up the advanced move tool, you can then press F on your keyboard to toggle between movement, rotation, and scaling. Now, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it says to press R to bring up the advanced move tool, which we did, but you can also bring it up by pressing F first. There are some cases in which pressing F instead of R will be more helpful, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. Starting with the advanced move tool, you'll see 3 different colored arrows on 3 different axes around the piece you're working with. Going back to geometry class for just a moment, the 3 axes are X, Y, and Z. X is the red arrow because taxis travel across the ground. Y is the green arrow because planes fly up in the air, and the Z is the blue arrow because it's the only one left. To move the piece on one of these axes, use your mouse to click on the arrow, hold, and drag the piece back and forth along that axis. Each arrow will kind of light up when you hover your mouse over it so that you know which arrow you'll be selecting when you click. In between the arrows, there are also little boxes made up of 2 colors. If you hover your mouse over those and click, you'll be able to move your piece on 2 different axes at once. So the red-green would be the X and Y, the blue-green would be the Y and Z, and the blue and red would be the X and Z. Now taking a look at the menu in the bottom left of the screen, we also have some additional options for moving our piece in different directions. Axis toggle has 2 different options, local and global. The local axis is based on your piece that you're working with. This means that even if you rotate your piece, the arrow will still fall in line with the actual piece itself. The global axis is based on the map and does not change regardless of the orientation of the piece you're working with. So, for example, I can rotate my stone trim piece a little, but it does not change the direction the axis arrows are pointing in. When you first bring out a piece from the menu before manipulating its orientation, the local and global axes will be the same. This is a trick I use often when building to help pieces line up properly. Essentially, I'll build an entire building on the world grid and only move it into place on the local grid once I'm done. Building on the world grid means that any piece you bring out from the menu is automatically on the same grid as the pieces you've already placed and therefore will line up much nicer. I could do an entire video talking about little tips and tricks like that, so let me know if that's something that you'd like to see. The next option we have is Move Snap. This option snaps your piece to whatever distance you set it to. Increasing the Move Snap will bring up white lines with markers at whatever distance you've selected. Now, when you move your piece back and forth, it will jump to that distance in whatever direction you're moving it. This works really well if you're placing something like pillars or small details on a building that you want to be equal distance from each other. The next option is kind of self-explanatory. It's speed control. This is going to change the speed at which your piece moves. Lowering the number will cause your piece to move slower and therefore can make precise placement a little easier. I find that keeping it either at 1 or lower while building is easiest for me to get those little details in. For the collision toggle, we need to leave our stone trim piece and move over to my very detailed part here and take a look at some dinosaurs and people. Turning collision on makes it so people and dinosaurs cannot walk through your piece with whatever you're building. So if you look at this poor little Drysaurus that I've trapped in this bamboo box, he can't get out because all of the bamboo wall pieces have collision turned on. If I select this box and then turn that collision off, you'll see that he can escape by walking right through the wall. It also works the exact same way if we go over here and we trap some guests in the park, but do keep in mind that the guests will actually despawn if you leave them for a while, whereas your dinosaurs obviously will not. This is an awesome way to keep your guests and dinosaurs from clipping through your buildings. You can see guests walking around the outside of this bamboo box to avoid walking through it. The last option is the terrain smoothing option, which honestly, I can't get it to work, so it might be a bug. I assume it's meant to smooth the terrain to the bottom of whatever piece you're working with. Hopefully it gets fixed soon, or if I'm just dumb and can't figure it out, and you did, please do let me know down in the comment section. Moving on from advanced directional placement, let's talk about advanced rotation. Hitting F toggles between the different advanced move tool options. Alternatively, you can use your mouse to click on the different movement options in the menu at the bottom left of the screen, but I find using the hotkeys to be much faster. Moving to the next gizmo, we now have the option to rotate our stone trim piece. This works basically the same way as the arrows, but now instead of arrows, we have circles that show which axes your piece will rotate on. Clicking, holding, and dragging your mouse will allow you to rotate the piece by whatever degree you want. As far as the options go, axis toggle and speed control work the same way as they did with the advanced move arrows, but angle snap is unique to the advanced rotation tool. Setting the angle to a certain degree will snap your piece at certain points along the axis, lower degrees being closer together and higher ones being farther apart. I usually use angle snap for the circular symmetry building trick to make perfectly round buildings or structures, which is something else that I can definitely cover in a more tips and tricks videos, since here we're just sticking to the basics. Next, we have the star of the show, scaling. As the name implies, it's used to scale your pieces bigger or smaller by clicking and holding on the singular blue circle and either dragging it out or dragging it in. With scale snap off, your piece will scale smoothly, but with scale snap on, your piece will sort of click through each size. You can also select a specific scale size with the slide bar next to the scale option. The last two options on the scale menu are scale snap size and speed control, and they work basically as you think they would. Snap scale size will determine the interval between scale sizes that you want your piece to snap to if you have scale snap turned on. What a tongue twister. And speed control changes how fast your object scales if you're just using the plain smooth scale option with no scale snap. Lastly, we have the plain move menu. To get to this menu, you have to actually click on the movement button in the movement menu. Pressing F won't toggle you to this option like it does with the 3 advanced move options. Clicking this will bring your piece back to your cursor like you've just selected it out of the scenery menu, but it gives you a few more options. Most of these options we've talked about already, so we're just going to touch on a couple of them. Position snap and position snap rotation will snap the piece you're working with to another that you've already placed down. However, position snap rotation only affects your piece if you're working with position snap turned on. Position snap will snap the piece you're working with to another piece without changing the orientation of the piece you're working with. And for the most part, it seems that it always snaps to the center of whatever piece you've already placed. Turning the rotation option on will also snap the piece you're working with to a piece that's already placed, but it will rotate the piece you're working with, placing it to sit flush against the piece that's already placed. This one can be a bit confusing on what exactly it does, so I suggest you kind of just place some items and play around with it. It's something that I don't generally ever use when I'm building, so I'm not quite sure when it would be most useful. But yeah, that's my recommendation, is just go ahead and play around with it and see what works. Next, the Add to Building toggle allows you to add a piece to a building group simply by moving it over to that group and clicking against a building group that's already been created. And we'll talk about building groups from scratch in just a little while. With Add to Building turned off, you can place pieces that are touching one another and they won't automatically be placed into a building group with one another. Random rotation is exactly as it sounds. It will randomly rotate your item on the x-axis each time you place it down. This is especially helpful for trees or other landscaping where you want to plant a bunch of the same plant, but you don't want them to look all the same. You want some slightly different angles to avoid those repetitive textures. It works on any piece, but really the only thing I use it for is plants and trees. Now let's go back and talk about why you would bring up the Advanced Move tool pressing F on your keyboard instead of R. Pressing R does bring up the Advanced Move tool, but it also gets rid of our piece menu. That means that now I can only advanced move this piece or duplicates of this exact same piece, instead of being able to select a different piece while keeping them in line with the last piece I placed. We'll come back to this in just a minute. If I go back and open up the Advanced Move tool with F instead, you can see that the Advanced Move gizmo still pops up around my piece, but the piece menu on the left stays where it is. From here, I can place this piece, but then also switch to a smaller version of it on the same piece while still keeping it in line. This is something I use all the time when I'm building to keep everything lined up nicely. This one complaint I do have about the game is that I wish this wasn't the case. I wish that the build menu, the piece menu, would stay up whenever you're in Advanced Move, and that way you can go back and forth between pieces and keep them perfectly in line with one another. Hopefully this is just an oversight and something that can be easily fixed in the future, because it is already a feature in both Planet Zoo and Planet Coaster. Now to talk about some pieces that I generally don't work with, and that's the gridded pieces. Gridded pieces work a little differently in that they are only able to be rotated on the x-axis. So when you open up the Advanced Move tool menu while working with a gridded piece, you'll see that the advanced rotation only has a green circle instead of all three. Although I don't usually work with the gridded pieces, they can be useful if you're just trying to throw something together really quickly, as they kind of snap to one another automatically on the grid. Placing a gridded piece will automatically create a new building group as well, and establishes the grid orientation, which additional gridded pieces being placed will snap to, even if the pieces are different. So, for example, if I bring out this wall piece, you can see that there are blue lines surrounding it. These lines show where the grid is going to be once the item is placed. I follow the same trick as I mentioned before, and I usually do not rotate the pieces when starting a new building, and only move it into place once the building is complete. This is less important if you're working with only gridded pieces, since they'll all snap to the grid that the first piece created. You can still use the Advanced Move tools when placing a singular grid piece, but once that first piece is placed, you cannot use it on any other pieces you are placing in the same building group. The next pieces you place will move and rotate according to the grid and easily snap in line with one another. You can change the grid size and height depending on where you want your pieces to snap to. Gridded pieces also have an auto stacking option, which will automatically align each piece to the top of the last one that was placed, making it really easy to build tall walls or other building structures. Lastly, in other Planet games, you were not able to advance duplicate grid pieces if they were not all in the same group together, but in Jurassic World Evolution 3, you can. So if I place this wall, and then go find a roof piece, and then separate the two of them into two separate groups by clicking on them and clicking Split Group in the menu in the upper left-hand corner, I can then reselect both pieces by clicking on one, holding Shift, and then clicking on another, and then I can duplicate them while also bringing up the Advanced Move tool by hitting Control F. However, for whatever reason, the two newly placed pieces are automatically put back into a building group together. So if you want them separate, you'll have to do it manually. This is actually incredibly helpful because it means that you can precisely place gridded pieces with one another, not on their grids, as long as they're in separate build groups, and then you can duplicate them all together and make a second copy. Again, not something that was in a Planet Zoo or Planet Coaster, so I'm kind of excited about this one. So I just mentioned build groups a lot, so let's go ahead and talk about them. Building groups make it easy to keep multiple pieces together and allow you to make changes to multiple pieces all at once, as long as they're all in the same building group. As we talked about, gridded pieces will automatically create their own group when being placed, but if you want to create a group manually, you can do so by selecting all the pieces you want to be in the group, and then after confirming your selection, you can click on Create Group from the menu in the top left corner of the screen. To separate a group and return all the pieces to singular items, all you need to do is click on one of the pieces in that group and then click on Split Group. When you create a group, you also have some options that make it a little easier to batch adjust the items you've placed, such as changing multiple pieces' color all at once. If your group has flexi-colored pieces in it, you'll see a color swatch square appear at the right of the group menu. Keep in mind that color changes affect every piece in the group, so if you have some items in the group that you do not want to recolor, you'll have to manually select the pieces you do want to work with. So for this group of bricks, it's no problem, they're all the same. I can click on the group and then adjust the color of the bricks all at once, super easy. But if I move over to this group that I've included bricks but also has a pillar and a wall, you can see that changing the color of slot 1 will change the color of any piece that also has a color slot 1. Neither the pillar nor the wall have a color slot 2, so adjusting the color on the slot 2 for the bricks only changes the bricks. Creating groups is also how you create and save blueprints, as well as turn on and off collision for every piece in a group all at once. Super self-explanatory, the options are in the group menu at the top left of the screen. Lastly, if you want to edit individual pieces in a group that you've already made, you can do so by selecting that group and then clicking Edit Group in the menu at the top left-hand corner. This makes it so you can work with the individual pieces in that group as you wish. You'll know you're editing within a group because there'll be a yellow bar at the top left that says Editing Group and little yellow and black dashes down the left side of the screen. Now in the Planet games, you could double click on a group and it would bring you into the group editing menu, so you could click individual pieces, but unfortunately that's not the case in Jurassic World Evolution 3. You do have to select the group and then click on Group Edit. Alright, only a couple more things, I promise. Hopefully you're hanging in there. Let's talk about multi-select. If you want to select multiple pieces all at once or multiple groups all at once, you can do so by clicking on one of the pieces or group and then holding Shift while clicking on the rest of the pieces you want to work with. Alternatively, you can press I and bring up the multi-select menu so that you can select multiple pieces or build groups at once by clicking and dragging a square across the screen that will select any pieces inside that square. Multi-selecting pieces by holding Shift is good if you want to pick and choose pieces that are close to one another or on top of one another. And then using the multi-selection square is good if you want to select absolutely every single piece in a given area. The only thing I find annoying about the multi-select feature is that you actually have to click on Confirm Selection in the top left-hand corner before it'll bring up the next menu that allows you to move, duplicate, or recolor whatever you've selected. Now, last but certainly not least, if you've built something and made a mistake, it's important to know how to delete pieces. Once pieces are placed, you can delete them by clicking on them and hitting the delete button on your keyboard, or by selecting delete on the menu in the top left-hand corner of the screen. If you're wanting to delete a bunch of pieces, you can press delete on your keyboard without having any pieces selected, and it'll bring up the demolish menu. With single delete, your cursor will be turned into a little bulldozer icon, and any piece you hover over will turn red, letting you know that that's the piece you're going to delete when you click left on your mouse. Switching over to bulk delete will bring up a red circle, and by left clicking with your mouse, you can delete anything within that circle. Anything in the circle will also highlight red, so you'll know it will be deleted. With the bulk demolish tool, you can also select how big the radius is and tell it what you either do or don't want it to delete by toggling certain categories on or off. So say I wanted to delete these benches and trash cans, but leave the paths and buildings and everything else alone. I would go ahead and turn everything off except for scenery. Now, as a side note, you'll notice that the trees that were singularly placed from the scenery menu were also deleted, and that's because these trees don't count as nature. The nature category only refers to trees and bushes placed down from the environment tab, so basically the landscaping paintbrush that you can paint across the ground. Scenery pieces are anything from the scenery menu, including trees and rocks pulled from that menu. I personally hope that this is something Frontier might change, since I think of trees like nature, and I would love the option to separate out individually placed trees from things like benches or other scenery items. Whew, what a long one. So I hope that answers all of your questions. If you have any more or I missed anything, please do leave a comment down in the comment section below. And again, if you found this helpful at all, even just part of it, leave a like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future Jurassic World Evolution 3 content. And if you want to share your Jurassic World Evolution 3 builds with me, you can tag me on Twitter or share them in my Discord. All those links are down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!